All right, let's go ahead and talk about exposure and how we can control it and how we can read our meter and really use exposure to get the correct image that we want. When I say correct image, I mean the right exposure. Your camera, the way that it works is it's got a meter inside it, and it actually reads the light coming through the lens, and its ultimate goal is to make things kind of a middle gray. It does not understand when you want to shoot a high key product or a high key subject. High key meaning white on white, so a very bright scene. It wants to make it gray. It also doesn't understand when you want to shoot something dark. So we're going to do some demos here, but when you shoot a black product on a black background, it wants to make the entire thing gray because that's all it knows is it's going for middle gray. Middle gray is perfect most of the time. Middle gray works just fine. Even if we're looking at this image here, I've kind of got a darker table. I've got a lighter background, and then I have kind of a neutral toned can. It's obviously green, but it's not real dark or real light. And if we look at our settings here, there's a spot down here where it says plus minus 0.0. So as I adjust my settings, you'll see that that can go up or down, right? So now you see I'm shooting at f13, it says -2. It's telling me that this scene, based on its own internal meter, is 2 stops underexposed. Pretty dark, isn't it? Let's go back the other way and see what it does. Okay, I can only go to 1 over because, or 1 over exposed because that's, my lens won't open up any more than that, but we can adjust another setting here. That's what it looks like when it's 2 stops over. So you can clearly see that the camera's just about right. When it says that it should be right about there, let's go ahead and take a shot. That it's pretty accurate. Now you can adjust this and you can set this, and this is the meter that the camera uses when you're in like auto mode. So if I were to put this thing in complete auto mode and start shooting images out of here, they would all be like this. And it's pretty close, but it's not quite right. I want to make it a little bit brighter, so I'm going to go ahead and adjust this until it's about a stop brighter. And to me, that just looks better. Some of the stuff is going to be a judgment call as you do it, because you can trust your meter, but you can't trust it all the way, right? It's there to reference so that you get some idea how close you are to middle gray. And when I say middle gray, I don't mean the color gray necessarily. I mean tone-wise, it's not really dark or it's not really light. So let's go ahead. This one is 1 stop overexposed and shoot that. So there are many different ways to change the exposure on this. We kind of talked about this in one of the videos where I talked about your depth of field. And in this case, let's just go ahead and play with this just a little bit. If we're saying that that's a pretty good exposure and that's shot at f4, we already know that we can control the depth of field and we can stop all this way, all the way down. Let's just say f22 right now. Oops. And we're going to go ahead and make our exposure time a little bit longer. Here's 1 stop overexposed. But now you can see that, like, the background, you see the wrinkles in the background on this image? I'm going to put it up on screen here. You can actually see not only the details of the can, but the details of the background. That's not necessarily what I want. But these are called equivalent exposures. I have 2 completely different settings on this camera, and I've got the exact same exposure. The only thing that's different is the depth of field. And it's because when I make one change in the camera, I go ahead and make a different change to compensate for that so that I have the same amount of light hitting the sensor, but I get different effects depending on what I want. So let's go ahead and we're going to change this shutter speed back down to 1/8 of a second. You can see it's dark. 1/8 of a second, f22 is too dark. But if I just really insist on actually shooting at those settings, what I can do is change my ISO. Watch what happens here. ISO is kind of my base ISO on this camera, and it's going to give me a very clean image, which is great for commercial uses. But look what I can do. I can cheat this out just a little bit. Look what I'm doing here. I'm changing the ISO. As I bring that number up, the sensor becomes more sensitive to light. It does a crappier job capturing the light because it gets grainy on the sensor, right? It's like digital noise. It's not as refined as that ISO 100. However, it still gives us some versatility and allows us to go ahead and do this. So I'm going to shoot at ISO 2000 right now, and then I'm going to take that shot. We're going to put this one up on the screen also, and then here you won't notice the difference when you're just looking at my camera footage, but when we pull it up and look at it, you'll see hopefully that it's a little bit grainier than the other one. Now, the quality of your camera is going to make a difference. If you're shooting with an entry-level Canon camera, let's say, and you put it at ISO 2000, it is going to be very, very noticeable to me as your instructor when I look through it, but also to your clients. They're going to be like, wow, this is really grainy. This is a little bit more expensive of a camera. This is a Sony a7 III. So you may not notice quite as much because it's better at handling that stuff at a higher ISO. But lots of different ways that you can change the settings to get the same exposure. In some circumstances, you might want to control the depth, like when you're shooting product photography and you want the product in focus, but maybe you have smoke or water or something going on in the background that you want kind of out of focus. You can shoot at f4 and be able to control that. If you're shooting bald eagles flying over the river, you don't really care about the depth of field, do you? So in that case, your priority would be on shutter speed, and you would set your camera on the S mode or TV mode, which is time value. You'll be able to set your camera and say, shoot at 1/2000th of a second, no matter what. I don't care what my aperture is, and I don't care what my ISO is. And then you'll be able to capture that eagle as it's flying, and its wings will be frozen in time. If you try to shoot that eagle at 1/10th of a second, or in this case, 1/8th of a second, as it's moving and flapping its wings, you're gonna get very blurry wings. So in that case, you're not worried about your depth of field. You're just worried about your shutter speed, right? So you can imagine there's really two camps to help you decide on what your settings are. If you're going out and you're shooting baseball players or football players, you want to be able to have a fast shutter speed. If you're doing product stuff like this and nothing is moving, then you want to be able to control your depth of field. There's another part of this that I want to talk about, and that is when your camera sensor or your camera meter is not quite right. So I'm going to go ahead and swap this out, and I'm going to show you what it looks like when we shoot white on white and then also black on black.